guys, welcome back to the Cars and Guitars podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is our third episode, and I'm super excited to be here and talk to you today. Bear with me. There's going to be a little bit of noise because they're repaving the road right in front of us, right in front of the studio. And they've actually finished the paving, but now they're doing the sidewalk, like literally like 10 feet outside of this wall right here. So there's going to be some noise from some trucks, so I apologize about that. Well, cool. Well, hey, let's get right to it. Let's talk about the news. Lots of things happening this week. This was the first week of Gumball Rally, and it's going through like Southeast Asia. I think they started in Vietnam. And I can't remember where it's ending up here, but lots of celebrities, lots of enthusiasts, lots of like car YouTubers and influencers on this rally, which is super cool. The page that I've been following, well, I've been following most of them, but Daily Driven Exotics is doing daily updates through the rally. They've taken a Lamborghini Aventador SVJ, which is super cool. Of course, they're having tons of issues with it because the last couple gumballs that they've taken it on, they've had issues with it. But yeah, they're doing daily uploads of all the cars that are on the rally and all the events that they're doing and all of that, which is super cool to watch. If none of you have, or if any of you have ever been on a rally, you know how cool it is. Super cool. Take some fun cars in a large group and go out there and have some fun. Gumball seems to be a little different. They plan everything for you, and they plan your hotel, your route, your food even throughout the week. And it's called Gumball 3000. They do 3,000 miles, which is just wild. I don't know of any other rally that does that. So it's super cool to watch, and tons of YouTube channels are uploading about it right now. So go check that out. Couple other things I wanted to mention. This week they finally got Ed Bullion's Lamborghini, both of his LP640s running. Which is super cool. Those old Murciélagos. Super excited to see that. I'm excited to see the final bill. I think actually by the time this video comes out, they'll have a final bill for everything. And they'll have all the videos posted of what they actually had to do to those cars, which is super exciting. I'm super, super pumped to see that. Doug DeMuro finally has come back from his house on Nantucket. He's back in LA, or I mean, not LA, sorry. He's back San Diego, where Cars&Bids is headquartered, and he is back on the podcast, which is super exciting. I actually liked the way that Kenan and Filippo did the podcast without Doug. But, of course, super exciting to see that Doug's back. The other YouTuber that's kind of been making his rounds through the news lately is Tavarish. Freddie Hernandez has been buying some crazy cars. Obviously, everybody's all excited about his McLaren P1 build. That is all about a flooded McLaren that he rescued from a hurricane in Florida. Now the P1 is got an electric motor as well as a gas motor, so I think he's converting it just to be a V8. But we're all super excited to see that. But he's also purchased an R8 that he wanted to completely rebuild, and a new used Aventador that is completely trashed to rebuild. So I'm super stoked to see that. If you guys like those rebuild projects, there's a couple to go look out for. But I think, the biggest thing in car news lately is absolutely got to be Grand Tour. The final episode has aired. We've watched Jeremy and James and Richard for 23 years now, go through all of the adventures from Top Gear into the Grand Tour, and now it's done. I think that last episode, I don't want to give any spoilers away for those of you who haven't watched it yet, but the way they ended it with coming back to some of their original Top Gear moments was truly incredible, and it was super sad to watch. I'm a huge fan of Top Gear and of Grand Tour, and a huge fan of the three of them just in general. Like, I've loved watching all of the Clarkson's Farm stuff, and I love watching James do his tour about James Gin, and the James May, Your Man in Japan, has been super cool to watch. And then with Richard Hammond doing his classic car garage, and all the building he's been doing there has been just incredible to watch. So super sad, but man, that is the I guess that's the way things go. You've been working on it for 23 years, and rather than ride it into the ground to where they're, too old to where they can't do anything, they just decided this is it. This is the spot where we end. And man, it was what an incredible career. Just super, super cool. On the guitar side of things, it's been an exciting month too. For those of you who are into pedals and stuff, Neural DSP kind of took over about a year ago or 2 years ago with the Quad Cortex for all the guys that were using Helix and Kemper and Tonex and all that kind of stuff. When Quad Cortex came out, it really was a game changer, not only in the platform itself, but also in the sense of just the actual quality. Like, for me, I was using an ACS1 from Walrus, which is fantastic. But when I switched to the Quad, it really, quality went way up. But Neural DSP has released the Nano Cortex this week, which is super cool. It's basically like, for those of you who are Helix fans, if you've used a full-size Helix, and then also there's an HX Stomp, you can do kind of the same ideas, but less features, but also way less in price. I think the Nano Cortex is something like $550 or something like that. Kind of that same idea as the smaller Kemper, the smaller Helix or HX, and all of that stuff. So super cool to see that. Super excited. I'm sure we're going to see those on a lot of boards, especially for the guys that like to go hybrid. And I did this for a long time. I had an analog drive section and delays and reverbs, and then at the end I went to like an ACS1. That way, if like I was going to a gig and I wanted to use an AC30 and a deluxe reverb instead of an ACS1, all I had to do was turn the pedal off. Versus that has been kind of a weird thing with a Quad. Whenever I want to use a real amp, the going through and switching off the IRs, it's not a big deal. It takes, a couple seconds, but like, it is nice to have that feature of being able to build some patches without it. So I'm excited to see what people do with that Nano Cortex. Other thing in the guitar world is Gibson just released the new Les Paul Studio. By and large, kind of the same guitar. It's a little bit of a refresh. You get binding on the neck now, which is cool. Burstbucker Pro pickups, which is cool. But I think the kind of two big changes is now you get like a glossy nitro finish, which they may have done that in the past, but they were making a pretty big deal about it this time. And then the last thing is on the outgoing studio models, you just had 2 regular volume, 2 regular tone. Now you get push pulls for coil splits and all of that. Some of you might like that. Some of you might hate it. Me personally, I'm not a fan of coil splits. I've had several guitars with coil splits. Most recently, I had a PRS DGT that has coil splits, and I used it once and thought it was not what I wanted, and so I just switched. I personally am like an old Telecaster guy. I've used Teles since I was 14. I've been playing Teles and Strats. I guess a Les Paul Special with P90s I've had since I was about 15. And I've had over the years SG Juniors, SG Melody Makers, a couple things like that that have been super cool, and I've enjoyed having. But yeah, I'm not much of a humbucker guy, anyways. Other than I've got two old humbucker guitars. I've got an old 335, and I've got an old ES 125, or I'm sorry, 175. And those are old humbucker guitars, and they're cool. And I use them for, like, actually we've got this pop band that does stuff kind of like Scary Pockets when we play around town. Scary Pockets and Pomplamoose and bands like that. And I do use the super dry, like, humbucker sound for that, and like a really drippy Fender amp, like a deluxe reverb. And that is always kind of a cool sound. But even last week we were playing, and I noticed I was playing my 175 mostly the whole night, and I just kept thinking I'd really like to have a Strat for this next song, because I guess I'm more of a single coil guy to begin with. But, you know, everybody's got their preference. Drop in the comments below, what do you prefer, single coils or humbuckers? I'd be interested to see what the difference is. Cool. That's all I've got for news this week. Talk a little bit about market report here. Back to the cars world for a second. I was checking out Cars and Bids, one of my favorite websites to watch. Cars and Bids and Bring a Trailer, a couple others. I love watching what's happening on the used market right now. I also love Ed Bullion's his theory of I want to look like I won the lottery 10 to 20 years ago. I think that's hilarious. And it's true, because most of us, let's be real, can't afford to go to Lamborghini and buy a brand new car. But, you know, you look into a 10, 20-year-old car, that they start becoming more affordable. One of the cars that I was looking at today that I thought, wow, I would never thought I would see these be this cheap. The Maserati Quattroporte. I mean, we're looking at a Ferrari Drive V8, fast car, not necessarily the most reliable, maybe not fast by modern standards, but fast in the sense of, is it going to be faster and more, certainly more exciting and more fun to drive than your regular Camry or Corolla, you know? But they're in the 10 to 15 grand range. One sold on Cars and Bids yesterday or the day before for like 12,000. I mean, that is just a steal. You're talking a mid 400 horsepower Ferrari Drive V8 for like 12 grand. That's crazy. Makes me want to go drive them. Granted, you're going to be 12 grand in maintenance costs probably, but it is what it is. One of my favorite cars from my childhood, that I grew up in like central Indiana. So, you know, right in the middle of the Midwest, we got GM factories and Ford factories all around us. So when I was growing up, I saw a lot of GM vehicles around, and one of the cars that I always loved, I still love to this day, I'd buy one if I could find a good deal on one, is the Pontiac G8. You know, it's same platform as like the Chevy SS and whatnot, but it's a mid-sized sedan with a 500 plus horsepower V8 in it. I mean, that is just wild. But they are still selling. I mean, that car was made from what, like 2005 to 2009, and they're still selling well over $15,000. 15-20 will get you a really, really clean one, which is super cool. And then if you get into the GXP side of it, those, I mean, you're in the mid-20s, maybe low 30s for a really nice example, and those cars are amazing. Now, granted, you still get to deal with the GM plastic and the maybe not so nice interior, but I will say Pontiac always had at least a little bit nicer interior than most of the other brands at that time. Certainly better than Chevy and GMC at that time. So that's cool. So if you're interested into the big displacement V8s and you want an American car, but you don't want to pay, 30, 40, 50 grand for a Corvette or a fully trimmed out Camaro or something like that. Those Pontiac G8s are sleepers, man. It's a super cool car. And there's tons and tons of part support for them right now too, which is super cool. Another car that I thought was coming down in price that I'm pleasantly surprised about, again, another car from my childhood, is the 996 911s. People made sweethearts out of the 993 and the what was it before that, the 986 911s, talking about how it's such a perfect mix of vintage analog supercar, but modern amenities. Certainly the 993 has been talked about that way. But I think even more than that, if you can get past those ugly headlights, the 996 is such an incredible car. It's so good. It's so good. And for all the people who are like, oh, well, it's the cheap 911. I don't want the cheap 911. Well, it is the cheap 911 because it's ugly. But guess what? It still drives like a 911. It still drives. It's got that raw driving experience. It's so cool. And I mean, we're finding like higher mileage, 60, 70, 80 grand, 80,000 mile 911s, 996s in the 20 grand range. I mean, give or take. I found one, actually, there was one on Marketplace next to my house a couple days ago. For $13,000, it had 140,000 miles, and it had all its service records. And I was like, that's incredible. I mean, it was a base model 996. It wasn't anything crazy, but man, what a cool car for 15, 20 grand. Especially if you've always wanted an enthusiast car and you want to, drive something that's fun and interesting and handles well. But you don't have a huge budget to go get, a new 911 for 120 grand or a new Huracan or a new whatever. That is a great entry into that. And I guess same with the Caymans. I mean, 2007 to 2012 Caymans are in that, 15 to 25 grand range too now. And in fact, you can find, granted, it's not a 911 engine at that point. That's at 2.7 liter H inline six. But if you look at that that generation of Cayman, and even like you could find a low mileage Cayman S with a manual for 21 grand or 22 grand. It's really a steal right now. And that car, I mean, that's the mid-engine version of a 911, essentially, maybe a smaller version of a 911, but it is such a great car to drive. And if you compare it to a 997, I don't think you're going to be super disappointed. I mean, it is really a fantastic car to drive. And then the last car, again, from my childhood that I've noticed is kind of becoming a deal. They're between 8 and 15 grand, depending on how clean of one you want. The Ford Taurus Show. Now, I'm not talking about that first generation show that was, quite the ugly car. But we're talking like 2009 to 2013 generation show. Man, number one, you get a fully loaded car, you get heated seats, cooled seats, you're getting Bluetooth audio, you're getting a touchscreen, you're getting really nice leather on the interior, you're getting tons of legroom in the back, and you're getting a twin turbocharged V6 that, essentially, if you follow the lineage of that engine, makes its way into a Ford GT. I mean, that is a steal of a car. I'm not saying it's Ford GT fast. I'm not saying it's even Ford GT cool. But as far as a cheap car to get around in, that you're going to actually have some enjoyment out of, that's a pretty cool car. That I would drive one. In fact, my current car is in that kind of category. It's that, $15,000 to $20,000 used fun enthusiast car. I've got a Cadillac ATS Coupe. Now I didn't get a V. Vs are still 30 to 40 grand, and I just wasn't going to spend that on this car. But I've got a white ATS Coupe over the Kona Brown interior, with the dual clutch paddles. It's not as cool as shifting your own gears in a manual, but it's quick, it's nimble, it handles really well. It's super fun, and I'm, not very much money into it. And I could still sell it for probably pretty close to what I bought it for, which is kind of my goal in any of these cars. As Ed Bullion says, I'm allergic to depreciation. So yeah, that's what I've noticed on cars from my youth. And I thought that was kind of a cool thing to watch out for. Looking back on guitars, I was kind of thinking the same thing, this week, of like the amplifiers of my youth and what they were going for. And I try to think back of like, what was my first, tube amp that I had? And now I grew up in a household where both my brothers play guitar. My parents are musicians, just a musical family in general. And so my brothers had AC30s. And I do remember that because they were huge. And a PV Classic 50, which was, I remember that. I didn't know it was a PV at the time. I just saw Tweed and thought Fender, but I was also probably 6 or 7 years old. But I remember my first amp my first tube amp was a Jet City, the 333, the 20 watt head, and I had a little 212 cab that I plugged it into. Those things are so cheap now. They were a tube amp made by Soldano. I mean, they were made in China, but so was the AC30, and so was 1,000 other amps at that time. But it's a little 12AX7 EL84 amp. And honestly, it is a Class A. It's a volume treble middle bass presence amp. And they sounded great. I just saw one at the store the other day, and used for, it had to have been $120, $130. And I plugged it in. Granted, I think it sold really quick because I think they really go for like $200 or $250. But I plugged it in and it sounded great. I was super pleased with that. And I thought, well, I may get one here for the studio just to give my students the experience of plugging into a tube amp, and then I don't have to wear out deluxe reverb all the time. But I thought that was cool. And the other amp I had at the same time was an Epiphone Valve Junior. And that is just a single volume knob, a single 12AX7, single EL84. And those sound great, especially like if you're a guy like me who likes to have some pedals on the floor, and you can get away with having an amp with just a volume knob. That's the one to do it. That's a great amp, and they're super easy to mod. There's a ton of mods out there. In fact, one of the mods is just snipping one of the diodes, and it gives you a whole new level of headroom, which is cool. So go check those out. Those have come down super cheap. I mean, you can buy a Valve Junior for $100 now. It's crazy. The other amp that was maybe more on the more serious side of when I started really playing as a kid, I had a 66 Blackface Bandmaster, the piggyback combo, or piggyback head and cab. I think I paid $700 at the time for that. That was like my first like big purchase. Well, now they're not much more than that. They're like $1,200 to $1,500 for the head and cab. Which if you compare that to like old Basemans, old Deluxes, old Princetons, those have gone up so much. It's incredible. And now with the with the Bandmaster, they're not very expensive at all in comparison, and they sound incredible. I mean, just think about like guys like John Mayer using the Bandmaster as his third amp. He might have his two rock and a Dumble, And then as his third amp, he's got a Bandmaster up there. I mean, think about the lineage of amps that it's sitting next to. They sound incredible. I ended up buying another one a couple years ago, just because I remember how great they sounded. And it seriously was one of the best sounding amps I've ever owned. So that's awesome. Go check those out. The other thing I noticed, I actually noticed this morning as I was scrolling through Reverb looking for amps and guitars, as I always do, and pedals. The reissued deluxe Reverb prices have come way down. I remember they used to be well over $1,000, but I was seeing them for $700 and $800. And the Tone Master one's even cheaper. Granted, I'm not a huge fan of the Tone Master stuff. I love the way it sounds if I just plug into the amp straight in, but there's something about the way it took certain overdrive pedals that didn't really resonate with me. But that's okay. I'm sure it will with some other people, and it's a fantastic tool, especially if you're gigging and you need to go direct, or you're at a church and you need to have a silent stage, anything like that. So anyway, check those things out. See what you think about that. Let me know in the comments, what was your first amp? What was your first amp that really inspired you to play? I'd love to hear that. Well, hey, thanks for letting me ramble today. Quick housekeeping. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, give us a follow on Facebook, on Instagram, we're not on Twitter, but on TikTok. Ring the bell, get the updates for when we post. We're going to post these every week. So check that out. And we'll have tons of other content for all you guitar players over on the Fortville Music Garage YouTube channel, Fortville Music Garage on Facebook, Fortville Music Garage on Instagram. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it, everything, and we'll see you next week.